said, dog, you dog world, just better make sure they eatin'. I don't wanna hear about loyalty, cause we all got different meanings. You ain't picking up what I'm putting down, you better off just leaving.
Welcome to the Outside Eye Podcast. It's another episode. I'm your host, Tyler. I hope everybody's having a beautiful, amazing Thursday. NBA trade deadline. Like, it's been absolutely, I don't know if I want to say crazy or weird. Like, it's kind of one of the weirdest trade deadlines I've seen in a very long time, probably since I started watching basketball. But, you know, a lot has happened. A lot of people have been traded, waived. In today's episode, I want to cover like three main like big trades. And then in the follow-up video, we'll cover the rest of them. The three main ones I want to cover today is the Harden and Darius Garland swap. You know, Harden goes to the Cavaliers, Darius Garland goes to the Clippers. I think that's a very interesting one. AD to the Wizards. Definitely one of those ones because where I think it could be good, I think it caught a lot of people off guard. And then lastly, Memphis blowing it up, trading Jaren Jackson to the Utah Jazz, which I think could be very good for the Jazz, and it has its upside for Memphis as well, but we'll get into that. But starting off though, AD to the Wizards. Like, that shit is crazy. I ain't gonna lie. Like, that shit is crazy. I think there's so much I want to say about this one because the Wizards, like I was just talking about in one of the previous episodes, like they have a lot of young talent that is only getting better, you know, by each game, each year. So I think AD going there, pairing up with Alex Sarr, who's already, you know, a crazy two-way machine, and allowing AD to play at the 4 is crazy. Then you have Trae Young at the point guard. I think their probable lineup would be probably Trae Young, Trey Johnson, or Bilal, AD at the 4, and then Sarr at the 5. Either way you go at the 2 guard with Trey Johnson or Bilal or, you know, anybody else, like that lineup is crazy. Personally, I would say they should stick with Trey Johnson at the 2 because I like his versatility he brings on offense. And he's not, you know, small where he'll be a cone on defense. But adding Bilal in there, you know, for some extra defense, extra wing, extra, you know, length would definitely, you know, it wouldn't hurt anybody. Keyshawn George, I talked about him as well. 6'7" guy. Pretty versatile. He can do almost everything on the court. His shooting is getting better each game. I think him being on the court, paired with AD, paired with Sarr, paired with either Trey Johnson or Bilal, they'll be able to hide Trey Young, because, you know, people say he can't play defense, he's small, which he is. He's a very small guard. So I think with those lengthy, tall, defensive guys, hiding Trae Young or Trae Young getting mismatch hunted won't be as big of a problem as people thought it would be. Adding AD to the mix on this young team where nobody has to be paid for a long time, it's crazy because the levels are limitless or what they can reach. Like, so I think that this team in the East, the East is getting more interesting. It's getting more interesting day by day. I think a lot of people will say like the West has always been better than the East, but I think that's starting to change. The way it's set right now, if everyone's healthy, I think the East, anyone in the East has a shot. I don't think there's no clear-cut favorite. Kind of, you know, how it is towards the West. I wouldn't say, you know, necessarily the Thunder are a clear-cut favorite, but they're obviously a favorite coming off of winning the title. And then you got the Nuggets, Rockets, teams like that. So, but in the East, I think it's really anybody's game. I talked about it on the last episode as well. You got the Magic, you got the Celtics. You know, we just seen the Pacers go to the finals. So I think it's up for grabs. And that team, you know, getting a full offseason. And if you factor in, they might have a top 3 lottery pick. Or just, yeah, you know what I'm saying? You're even the top 5, top 10 pick, which is crazy to already add to this young team where nobody has to be paid for a while. And where the options, you know, and the variety of that team is out of this world. So if they get a lottery pick on top of adding AD, this team has crazy potential, which it already does, even if they don't get a lottery pick. But getting a full offseason under their hand, you know, under their belt, them, you know, Trae Young working with AD, Sarr, all these boys, I think that team will honestly be crazy because, it's kind of a team. I'm not going to say they're necessarily similar to the Wolves, but the Timberwolves, the way their team is constructed, a lot of people can shoot, and they just added Io DeSumo from Chicago. A lot of people can shoot. Jaden McDaniels can shoot. Dante DiVincenzo can shoot. You got Nas Reed. You got Io now. So a lot of those guys can shoot. And on top of that, they're very lengthy. They're very athletic. They push the floor. They push the pace. They're going to swarm you. And they can win games just off of like swarming you and crowding you and having so much athleticism paired with, the defense and the shooting that they're just winning off of the strength of that. Not to mention that they have Anthony Edwards, who's one of the most bona fide superstars in the league. Like just the way how young and athletic those guys are and how they can swarm you and cloud you, and their defense is elite. I think that's kind of the same thing with the Wizards. Like you got all these guys are like, besides Trae Young, are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", and up. You got AD, he's a footer. Sarr is a footer. Keyshawn George 6'7". Bilal, he's 6'7". Trey Johnson, he's 6'5". Scoring guard, elite scoring guard. He's not a small guy. Like there's a lot of lengthy guys, which is kind of similar to, Timberwolves. I think they could kind of put together the same kind of thing over there. They kind of have the smaller guard, Dante DiVincenzo. Obviously, Trae Young is far better talent, far better player. They have the bona fide superstar AD. He may not be what he was in his prime days, but I think AD on the floor, whenever he's on the floor healthy, he is still one of the best two-way, if not the best two-way player in the game. I don't think that's up for debate. I'm not here for the, the Twitter narratives. Oh, he's injury prone. No, when he is on the court, he is easily, if not the best two-way player the game has ever seen. So there's no debate about that. There's no discussion about that. So you pairing that with Sarr, who's already, one of the, best young two-way players in the league as well. You pairing that with AD, who can give him veteran leadership, give him pointers and stuff like that. Like this team has crazy potential, not just offensively, but, defensively. Now I've talked about the defense, but the offense as well. You got Trey Johnson, like I said, his versatility on offense is crazy. The way he can score the ball is insane. We already know about Trae Young. He's easily a walking 26-10 or, 25-12, whatever the case may be. So we know what Trae Young can bring to the table. Keyshawn George, like I said, he's having, one of his better years of his career. He's shooting the ball better. He can handle the ball as well. He's not elite, but he's not, no slouch where he's losing the ball. Then you got AD. We know what AD can bring. I was just saying, he's one of the best two-way superstars we've ever seen in the history of the game, let alone in the league right now. So when he's on the floor, he's liable to give you 30 points, 12 rebounds. Alex Sarr, he's been having an amazing breakout year. He's playing exactly how, the position he was drafted in. People said he wasn't playing to, his potential. And this year, he's almost averaging close to 2 blocks per game. He can shoot the ball. He's creating, posting up. Like, he's doing it all. He's coming out into the player that a lot of people expected him to be. People who didn't follow him before the NBA, like, people were telling him what he can be. And, when he came out, a lot of people didn't think Alex Sarr was anybody. Nobody paid attention to him. He wasn't a big name that jumped out like Cooper Flagg or Victor Wembanyama or Paulo Banchero or something like that. He wasn't one of those guys. People who followed him and knew about him knew he could be an elite talent. He didn't go that high for no reason. But, to the average fan, which is no discredit to them, they didn't really know who he was. And, I feel like that kind of fueled him a little bit over the years. So, but this year, like I said, he's having his best year, and I think he's only going to get better. He's super young kid, and I think his levels are, limitless. I think he can go anywhere. And now you pair him with somebody like AD, who is going to, not one, his gravity alone is going to open up plenty of options for Sarr. He's a great lob threat for Trae Young. And, having a playmaker like Trae Young and then having a big next to you like AD is arguably the best setup you can have for a young center like Alex Sarr himself. So I think with those two pairing, I think he'll be he can easily end up being like an AD, but he plays a 5. He excels at playing a 5. So, and that's another thing with AD said in an interview when he was on the Lakers that he had his most success in his career and he loves playing the 4. He can play the 5, but he doesn't, that's not necessarily what he wants or what he envisions himself as. So with Alex Sarr at the 5, AD at the 4, I think the Wizards can make some real noise in the East, even this coming year, especially with they're gonna have the offseason to work together, training camp, all of that. I think that will help. Because I'm not sure if the Wizards will play Trae Young, throughout the rest of this year, or even AD for that matter. I think AD is still out with his injury. Trae Young has some injury, they're saying. I think they get that lottery pick. That's a whole nother possible issue they could have. Not that they can have, but that the East can have. Because then you got, let's say they get a Cam Boozer or an AJ. You know what I'm saying? So I think those two names alone, we know what they can do. Those guys are arguably crazy all around players in college right now. AJ, we know what he is. I feel like Cam Boozer isn't getting the love he deserves because you got DP over in Kansas, and then you got AJ. Those are the two biggest names, two number one overall picks. But I think people are starting to forget what Cam Boozer is as well. Cam Boozer is 6'8", 6'9", and easily is kind of like a Cooper Flag, can do everything on offense, everything on defense, everything on the basketball court in general. At a very, very high level. So I think if you add him into the mix as well with a guy like AD and Sar, like, that's even scarier. I know people are going to say, oh, it's the Wizards. Like, they're never going to do shit. Like, no, I think people need to put more respect on these players, on the Wizards, because I love watching them. I'll tell you that right now. I tell my friend Blake all the time, me and him talk about them. I watched them even when Denny was over there before he went over to the Trailblazers. Like, I love the Wizards. I love watching them. And with all this young talent, they're even more fun to watch. I know they lose games, they don't have the best record, whatever the case may be, but they're still a good, fun team to watch, especially with the young talent that they have. So I think adding Trae Young to the mix, adding AD to the mix, and whenever pick, possible lottery pick, this team can do, a lot of damage in the East, especially because, you got teams like Celtics, Jason Tatum coming back from an injury. We don't know what he will be, if he'll be the same, better, or even worse. Same thing with Hallie. We don't know if he'll be better, same, or worse. Then you got Philly, who's, shaky with their injury history as well. Like, that East is pretty open, but healthy, is very competitive, and it is very talented, and it'll be definitely tough for the Wizards, to compete in there. But I think they will be able to, and I think that this trade is great for them, and I think it puts them in a great position going into the future. Now, kind of transitioning over to another trade that that happened out west. Memphis blowing it up and sending Jaren Jackson Jr. to the Utah Jazz. Excuse me. Now, this one shocked a lot of people because a lot of people thought Ja Morant was going to be the one traded first, and then that him and Memphis relationship was fractured. But they got rid of Jaren Jackson. Now, this is the craziest part about this trade to me, and I think Memphis GM needs a lot of props and he needs his flowers for this as well, is he turned Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. into 7 first-round picks. I want you guys to think about that for a while, for a little bit, because Trae Young and Luka Doncic, who, the talent and resume speaks for themselves. You know what those players are. Luka is easily one of the top players in the league. Trae Young, we know about him, just talked about him, today and in the last couple episodes. Luka and Trae Young, they only went for 1 first-round pick combined. So for the fact that Memphis GM turned Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. into 7 first-round picks and 12 first-round picks over the next 7 years is absolutely incredible. It's the elite, like, general managering. I don't know if that's a word, but I just made it up if it is. Like, he just played it to a T. I know people are going to say, oh my God, like, that, I believe it was a 2023 team, like, Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones, Dylan Brooks, John Morant. That team, the vibes were high. Jaren Jackson Jr., the vibes were high. It was a great team. But, for whatever reason, once Dylan Brooks departed, whatever reason they let him go, like he was scapegoated. But that's another discussion for another day. They let him go, and then that kind of was like the downfall, people would say, of Memphis, because he was kind of a culture guy, and I believe that he was, because once he went to Houston, he kind of set a culture there, and the Houston fans will tell you, even if you watch or pay any attention to the Rockets, the vibes were high. He was kind of their enforcer, like he was that guy. He was a culture guy, but it's not just that. His talent goes under the radar as well. I think once he went to Houston, it kind of, he up this game, excuse me, and he made a lot of improvements to his game, which put a lot of people on notice. But I think Dylan Brooks always kind of had that talent. If you look back on his college tape, he had that talent as well. So I think it was a surprise to a lot of people, but a lot of players have a lot of talents that they aren't able to showcase on certain teams. So I think that plays a part into it as well. But going back to what I was saying, once he left Memphis, that was kind of the downfall of them. Then Tyus Jones departed. He went over to I want to say, what was it, the Suns, I believe. So yeah, once Dylan Brooks left, it was kind of the downfall of Memphis. From there, everything started to trickle down. Then you had the reports coming out, the past couple of months, Ja Morant and his relationship, being fractured with Memphis front office. A lot of people, speculating they were going to trade him before the trade deadline. This and third. At the time of me recording this, Thursday, trade deadline did pass, and Ja Morant wasn't moved. They say his value is like basically at an all-time low. Nobody wanted to make significant offers for him. I kind of don't really believe that. And if it is true, I think Memphis played a huge role into that. Like, yes, Ja Morant had the two previous gun incidents on Instagram Live, whatever the case may be there, which I'm not like excusing him for. Yes, what he did was incredibly stupid. Doing it twice, it's stupid. It didn't need to happen. But I do think he learned from that. I think like Ja Morant's talent isn't in question. His injury history is a little shaky, but I don't think that necessarily should. The way they have his value, It seems like they're valuing him like the same as like Cam Thomas or somebody like that, or even like a Trae Young who didn't really go for much besides a Corey Kispert and the salary filler TJ McCollum. So I think there's a lot of weird things. I kind of touched on this in one of my previous episodes that like I think that these franchises are saying certain things to the media, or like, and kind of hinting and alluding to certain things in the media, or even leaking things to the media. We got these reports from anonymous GM and things like that to kind of devalue these players. So it's either like, so the franchise always has the power, which is it's just some speculation to me. It's my opinion, my personal opinion. I'm not knocking these franchises or anything like that, but I do think that's something that happens not just in NBA but in NFL as well. But focusing on Memphis and Ja's talent is unmatched. His athleticism is one of the craziest I've ever seen. Probably most people have ever seen in the league. Now I will say, his antics off the court, I won't even say antics. So there were, he had his two little incidents, but other than that, Ja Morant, when he's on the court, he's one of the best players in the NBA, one of the best point guards in the NBA. So I don't think his value being this low is necessarily true. And if it is, I think the franchise plays a huge part in that, because there's no way you're telling me that Ja Morant value is at an all-time low to the point where they didn't even get a trade off of him. You're telling me we were able to trade Jaren Jackson Jr., which no knock to him, before Ja Morant, because you couldn't get a significant offer. It just doesn't sound appealing to me. Now I know people would be like, "Oh, Tyler, why would they talk about Ja and knock his value, and if they want to trade him?" I think they're doing that because like if they talk about Ja and leak these reports and make it seem like Ja's is a bad player, they have the control. Like like they said, for example, Giannis with the Bucks, they work with Giannis to kind of find a destination that he would prefer. They not just the best deal that the franchise can get. Memphis didn't do that with Ja. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't value him like Milwaukee values Giannis. So they didn't even work with Ja to like find a possible destination that he likes. I know the Kings were interested. They were thinking about sending him there. So I think that's kind of why the franchise does it. They do that to kind of control what happens with said player. So I think like they're going to do whatever they can do to get, the best package for them, which ended up turning out to be nothing, because deep down they still know the type of player Ja is. He's an elite talent, one of the best point guards in the NBA, one of the most athletic point guards of all time. So I think the franchise knows what Ja is and what his talent and what he can bring to the table, or to any team for that matter. But they also still want to be able to control it to where like he doesn't really have some say so, and they can kind of do what they feel his best, which I'm not necessarily knocking the team. Like, of course, yes, set up your franchise, get the picks, whatever you can, for Ja. But at the same time, like, I'm kind of pro player. So it's like, I feel like you should still want to work with Ja. You don't want to shatter these relationships because it kind of then looks bad to free agents coming into Memphis. Like, damn, they didn't even work with Ja because, whatever the case may be, maybe some behind the scenes locker room stuff. But like, that's kind of like, I think it's unappealing to a lot of free agents coming in, especially because Memphis isn't a big market in the first place. So when you kind of got that shicey, kind of business going on, it's kind of unappealing to a free agent, I can imagine. But at the same time, this is still all my opinion, still all speculation. But I feel like there's still some truth to it. Now it could come off that Ja value is just this low. Like, there is no shicey stuff going on. Ja is just, people really don't see Ja as being, a crazy boatload of picks worthy, or young players and a couple picks. People may not see that Ja is that, or valued as that, which I don't think is true. I think Ja is still, like I said, one of the best point guards in the league when he's playing. Yes, he has the health issues, but I don't know. I'm not buying into this shit that Ja's value is just at an all-time low. You can't get anything off for him, and he's just, that's it. Now they're stuck with him, going past the trade deadline. So let's see if they move on from him in the offseason. But, like I said, though, their GM did cook up. He did get the 12 first-round picks over the next 7 years. 7 picks just from Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. So yes, he did cook up there. But let's look at the other side of it. The Jazz getting Jaren Jackson Jr. I think kind of like kind of like the Wizards. Great young team. Now it's kind of harder for the Jazz because I'm not necessarily sure. Like, they have the talent, they have the young players, but I'm not sure if they can compete as hard as a Wizards team. Because the way the Wizards are, like I said, they have the talent, they have the young roster, lengthy, all of that. They have pretty much a lot of the boxes checked. But the East, like I said, the East is a little bit it's a little less easier. It's a little easier than the West in terms of competitiveness and star-studded talent. So the way the Jazz are set up, they got Keontae. Their probable lineup will probably be Keontae George, Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Walker Kessler. Now that's a crazy lineup because I think it brings almost everything that you need. Besides Keontae, I think Ace is probably like 6'6", 6'7". Lauri's almost a footer. Jaren Jackson Jr. basically a footer. Walker Kessler's like a footer, footer 7'1", something like that. But besides Walker Kessler, all those guys can shoot. Keontae, we know he's an elite talent, elite offensive talent, having his best career year this year by far. Multiple 30-point games, multiple 30-point and 8 assist games this season. Ace Bailey, rookie, but we know he can easily. He's a crazy shot creator. His 3-pointer, great. He's still young, but I think he's only going to get better. I don't think a lot of people give him credit for the way he can score the basketball. Lauri Markkanen, we know what he can bring. Probably one of the best 3s/4s in the league, whatever you may categorize him as. Some people say he's a 4, some people say he's a 3. But Lauri Markkanen, easily 25-point per game scorer. Then you got Jaren Jackson Jr., former Defensive Player of the Year, can shoot the ball. He's been shooting a 3 a lot lately the past couple of years. So I think with him in there's nothing you really lack offensively with this team in terms of just scoring, like I said, offensively. Now, speaking on the defensive side, like I said, I didn't even speak about Walker Kessler. Great rebounder, great shot blocker. I think he's super young as well. He's a restricted free agent this summer, which may cause some little, commotion in terms of their lineup and what the Jazz may do. If I'm the Jazz, I personally will do everything I can to keep him, because that lineup right there is young, talented, can shoot the ball, great defense. Well, not great defense, I'll say good defense. You got former Depoy, then you got Walker Kessler as well in the paint. So I think between him and Jaren Jackson Jr., like, that paint is pretty, on lock. Jaren Jackson Jr., he could kind of pivot towards the floor, so he doesn't necessarily have to rebound because we know he's a terrible rebounder. But with Walker back there, I think he excels defensively. I think them pairing them together is crazy. It's kind of almost similar to the Wizards, AD and Sire. Like you're pairing a good vet. I guess you could categorize Jaren Jackson Jr. as a vet. He's not necessarily as old as AD, but pairing him with Walker Kessler, like it's crazy. I think those two together, that defense is going to be amazing. Um, but like I said, though, they kind of don't necessarily lack anything. But the question I have to myself, and so I guess you guys would be like, excuse me, would just be like, when you look at this team on paper, clearly we haven't seen them play together, but they don't jump out to you like a Denver Nuggets, OKC. I think we would have to give them maybe a year or two. They'll probably play out the rest of this year, obviously. Get some games under their belt, but get the training camp off season and all that. I think if we give them a year or two, maybe 2 or 3 years, that they could make some real noise. Like I said, they got a lot of young guys. You got Isaiah Collier off the bench. You got Bryce off the bench. Isaiah Collier is one of the best playmakers in the league. Just had 22 assists, maybe a game or two ago. Bryce, great scorer, having one of his best offensive years. So I think they have a lot of young talent. They have a nice little bench. They have depth, but they don't necessarily jump off paper, like a Thunder, like a Nuggets, or even I think the roster is probably better than the Lakers, but they don't have the longevity and experience that the Lakers do, or even the Rockets for that matter. So I think that we do have to give them maybe 2 or 3 years. Hopefully they keep Walker Kessler in the offseason, because I know he's a restricted free agent. If they keep him this summer and keep these guys together, I think these guys could make some noise in the next 2 or 3 years. I don't think they'll make some immediately next year. They'll probably sneak into a play-in, but in terms of like a 1 to 6 seed or anything like that, I think we'll have to give them 2 or 3 years, or maybe even longer than that. But I think those guys paired together will make some good noise, and the future is very bright over there in Utah. So that's why I say with that trade, it's probably a win-win in terms of Memphis garnishing gathering up picks, 12 first round picks over the next 7 years, and then Jazz, they pairing up defensive player of the year with Walker Kessler, and then you have Keontae, Ace, and Laurie. Like the limit, the sky is the limit for them. The future is bright, a lot of young talent. Like I said, they're in a very, very competitive Western Conference, so I think it'll definitely battle test them to get a lot of good tests, got a lot of good games, close games. But I don't think they'll be a walk in the park like the Jazz we've come to know over the couple of years. I think all that bottom of the barrel record and all that stuff is kind of in their past. As long as Keontae George keeps this path trajectory, I think they'll be fine. Ace Bailey, I know he hasn't been exactly what people expected him to be, but I think if you watch the Jazz, you watch Ace Bailey, he still can score the ball like elitely. I think his confidence is through the roof. When you watch Ace Bailey, you could tell he doesn't necessarily, I feel like he doesn't think he's a rookie. If that makes sense to you. I feel like when you watch him, he knows what he can do. He knows what he can bring to the table. It's just a matter of, getting the reps, getting the confidence, and, building up just repetition of doing what he can do in those games. So I think with him, he's only 19, 20. You got Laurie, JJJ, and Walker. Them boys they'll be pretty good in the next 2 to 3 years. I'll definitely watch the Jazz, keep an eye on them, even this year, or next year as well. I'll just watch these boys the rest of the year, see how they pair, see what the potential could be. It'll be fun to watch these boys in the next couple of years, though. Now transitioning over to the Harden and Darius Garland trade. Excuse me. Now, I think this trade is definitely another one kind of similar to the AD to the Wizards trade that caught people off guard because it kind of came out of nowhere. Excuse me. In terms of the Clippers, they've been rolling. If you've been watching the Clippers, they started the year off terribly. A lot of people were scared because the Thunder have their pick, so people thought the Thunder was going to get a lottery pick, but then all of a sudden, Ty Lue comes out In the interview, he says if we could finish, second half of the season 35-20, or we can go on a run or something like that. If 35-20, then we can get in, and then the possibilities are limitless. So right after he said that, maybe a week or two after, the Clippers go on a crazy run, maybe something like 15-3 or something like that. And things were looking bright, things were looking good. Kawhi is playing elite MVP level basketball, all NBA level of basketball for that matter. He's been amazing. Everything was rolling for them boys. Zubac was hurt, which I think opened their eyes to a lot of things with the Zubac going out. Because once he went out, their offense completely changed for the better. Some people say, "Oh, why would you say that? Zubac is a double guy." But Zubac is very slow on his feet, defensively and offensively, and for that matter, Harden made him. I wouldn't say necessarily made, but Harden made Zoo a better player than what he is. I don't think if it wasn't for Harden, Zubac wouldn't be nearly what he is now. But even with Harden there and Kawhi and all these guys, his feet is still extremely slow. So that offense is very stagnant at times. Even the defense, is very stagnant at times. Then you slide in Brook Lopez into there once Zubac goes out, and his first game he had like 9 threes or something crazy like that. And the offense is rolling and things are looking good. And, like I said, it went on a crazy streak. Zubac comes back and the offense kind of, takes that step back again, and it's very stagnant and very slow pace, and it was just bad. It was easy for defenses to set up on them. So I think the Clippers front office noticed that, realized that they were it's kind of similar to the Trae Young thing. Once Trae Young went out, and the Atlanta Hawks were like, "Oh wow, we could do something without this guy, but I know we can get something for this guy if that makes sense." You know what I'm saying? So I think it was kind of like that. Now with Harden and DG, but before I get into those two players, at the time of recording, Zubac was traded to the Indiana Pacers. So that kind of goes hand in hand what I was just saying. I think the front office knew it's time to move on from Zubac. You can win without him. The offense looks 10 times better without him. They ended up getting Benedict Mathurin in the trade, and they got picks as well. So the Clippers did an amazing job of, flipping Zubac for, Benedict, elite scoring guard, very, very, very confident scorer. And on top of that, they got picks as well. So I think that was great by the Clippers front office. But getting into the Harden and DG thing, this is I like this because I like this for both sides. I'll say that before I get into it. I think it's a win-win for both sides in their own, terms of context. For Darius Garland, let's look at the Clipper side of it. Because we were speaking on the Zubac trade. So speaking on the Darius Garland, or the Clipper side of it, I think it's great for them because one, Darius Garland, the biggest thing is he's 10 years younger than James Harden. James Harden's 36, Darius Garland is 26. Now, when you factor in the young age of Darius Garland, the type of player he is, if you look at his stats without Donovan Mitchell, he's averaging 25 points per game. He's a great playmaker, elite playmaker. He can shoot the ball well. The biggest critique with Darius Garland, or I would say the biggest two critiques of Darius Garland, is his health, specifically his lower body. Turf toe, ankles, knees, all that. And that he's a smaller guard, kind of similar to Trae Young as well. And guys going to give you those 25 and 10 games, 20, 22 and 8, 7, whatever the case may be. Great playmaker, great scorer, but he's a smaller guard and he has his health issues. So I still think this is a huge win for the Clippers because you get off of Harden, who reportedly, allegedly wanted a contract extension that the Clippers weren't willing to give him. I think it was something similar to like a Jimmy Butler 2-year, 3-year deal, crazy high money. I think it was like 80, 90 million or something like that scene. Which is hard to bank on because Harden is having a crazy year. He's averaging 25 points per game, like around 5 rebounds per game, and then around like 8 assists per game, which is still very great. Yeah, crazy. Specifically at his age and being 36, averaging those numbers, insane. But I think giving him 40 or whatever, 40 million a year or whatever it was, wouldn't have been the best decision. I kind of think Steve Ballmer and the Clippers knew that. So with them knowing that and able to get Darius Garland for it, I think it was a win because you get younger. You don't have to pay an older player somewhere north of $40 million a year. Um, you not knowing what he's going to bring or how he's going to, if he's going to get worse or he's going to stay the same or whatever the case may be. You didn't necessarily bank on that. You rather bank on the young guard. You know his potential. You know what he can do. So I think in the terms, for the Clippers terms, I think it was great. Like I said, you get younger. Darius Garland. Yes, he has his health issues. Yes, he's a smaller guard, which I think I'm not going to just brush past those. I think Darius Garland does need to strengthen his lower body, kind of like something like how Steph Curry did. Steph Curry is it's kind of weird though because Steph Curry gets grouped into small guards, but Steph Curry is 6'3". He had in the beginning of his career, I don't think a lot of people noticed in the beginning of Steph Curry's career, he had a lot of lower, ankle issues specifically. It bothered him for a while in his career. And then he strengthened his lower body, over the years, his early years, started wearing ankle braces constantly. And then he kind of, shifted into the Curry we all know and love today. But a lot of people don't know that. He dealt with ankle injuries basically his whole early NBA career. So I think that's kind of something Darius Garland has to do while he's still super young. He's still only, like I said, he's only 26. I think you have to strengthen that lower body. Granted, injuries can happen to anybody. Injuries happen to, like I said, LeBron James. He spends $1 million plus on his body per year, still gets injured. But I think his longevity, LeBron takes care of his body, he strengthens his body. That was a big critique on him early in his career. LeBron's always put on his muscle. He can't shoot. His shot will never be, what it should be because, he's always putting on his muscle. I think Darius Garland needs to kind of take on something similar to how Steph Curry did. I think you need to build the strength in your lower body, your lower extremities, just so you can build the strength to where you won't get it injured as much as possible. Now, something like turf toe, I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure there's no way to necessarily, avoid getting turf toe. But in terms of the ankle sprains and the knees and the, things like that, I think you have to strengthen the lower body so you can prevent these injuries, in the coming years. So I think if he gets it under handle, which I think he can, and I think he more than likely has the capabilities of doing, especially with the Clippers, doctors and things like that. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be perfectly fine. You got Darius Garland for the next coming years. He's super young. He only could get better. Play next to elite, one of the best players to ever play the game, Kawhi Leonard. So I think that'll be good for him. So, like I said, win for the Clippers, but pivoting over to the Cavaliers, like I said, it's a win for them as well. Now in terms of the Cavaliers, I think it's really a big win for them because they kind of got pretty stagnant. Rich Paul said it in his in his podcast with Max Kellerman, that he said Darius Garland is going to be your last season. He told Darius Garland that's going to be his last season as a Cavalier because, unless they were anything less than a championship team or, great start. I think that was kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of the direction that the Cavaliers were heading to because coming off of the disappointing playoff loss, you go into the season and you kind of, okay, let's, feed off of the energy we had, last season, early in the last season, they had a crazy record, throughout the regular season. So I think that, the Cavaliers, they were going into this season with the mindset of, okay, if we don't, kind of start very high, have a great first half of the year, then some things are going to have to be, changed. And reports came out saying that Darius Garland, that Donovan Mitchell said that he wanted to specifically play with Harden, and that if things didn't look good, that they believe they shouldn't stay still at the trade deadline. Now, I agree with Donovan Mitchell. I do think that that offense, not even the offense, just that team in general became very stagnant. We kind of knew what they were going to be. Like I said earlier, speaking on the Wizards, yes, the East is not as talented as the West, but it was still open. And for the Cavaliers, not really pounce on that with a pretty great team on paper, pretty great team if you eye test. for them to not pounce on that, it was kind of disappointing. And with the new CBA rules, a lot of these teams are ducking the luxury tax and first apron and second apron and things like that. I think that plays a part into it as well because we instead of like I said, Darius Garland, he's super young. There's gonna be more contracts and things like that. If your team isn't performing, why am I, going into these first aprons, going into these luxury tax? If we're not really doing anything, I feel like they kind of hit a plateau, with that team. So swap out Darius Garland, who's always kind of on and off the court. Like I said, he had the lower extremity issues. He's always in and out the lineup. It's kind of has to be frustrating, not just for the front office, but for Donovan Mitchell, their star player. I imagine that the front office doesn't want their star player to be upset and kind of disgruntled, with one of the he's supposed to be his running mate, his co-partner in this, in the Cavaliers is always in and out the lineup with injuries. I imagine that's frustrating. So Donovan Mitchell definitely probably voiced his concerns, and they ended up turning into James Harden, which I think is a great vet. James Harden has been in this league for a long time, very elite talent, probably one of the best scorers we've ever seen, easily one of the 3 best scorers we've ever seen. I think he's a great match with Donovan Mitchell. James Harden is one of the best playmakers we've seen as well. I don't think he got a lot of love for that. People say, we focus on the James Harden who scored 40 points a game and things like that in Houston, but I think James Harden has really pivoted into his playmaking kind of role, and he's one of the best playmakers, not just in the league, but ever. So pairing him with Donovan Mitchell, I think it'll be great. I think Harden, a lot of people, there's going to be the memes and things like that. People saying Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, it's only one ball, they can't share it. I'm not really in too much. I'm not going to feed into that too much because I think Donovan Mitchell specifically wanting James Harden and James Harden specifically wanting to go to Cleveland, I think, and James Harden being an elite playmaker, I think they'll match perfectly. I think Donovan Mitchell's elite scoring with James Harden elite playmaking on top of his elite scoring is just going to open more things up for Donnie. I think I do want to see Donnie, kind of not necessarily improve his off-ball game, but just I think he'll have to lean on that a little bit more at times playing with James Harden, and vice versa for James Harden. I think one of the best things about James Harden going to the Cavaliers is I think he'll unlock Evan Mobley. I think kind of how I was talking about Zubac, the same thing will happen with Evan Mobley. People kind of say Evan, like the meme or the troll, or I guess you could say about Evan Mobley is that he's just a 15-8 guy. And he's going to go out there and get you his 15-8, 15 points, 8 rebounds. But I think playing with a guy like James Harden will easily improve him. Because you got Donovan Mitchell and you got James Harden out there. It's going to open up things for other players, the pick and rolls and things like that, pick and pops. Evan Mobley is shooting the ball now. So I think with that, you factor in that with James Harden and his track record, he played with Embiid. Embiid got MVP. I'm not necessarily putting all that on James Harden, but it's a fact. He played with James Harden and he got MVP. Zubac, he wasn't nearly as good as he was, like I said, until he got Harden. He started playing with Harden, and we see what happened there. He turned into a walking 20-10 or 18-10, whatever the case may be, 18-12. So I think James Harden will definitely unlock Evan Mobley, and Evan Mobley will definitely tap into another level that I think a lot of people kind of don't think he has, but I definitely think he has. I think Evan Mobley, I think he can be really, really, really good in this league, but he has to also want it as well. But I think playing with a guy as motivated as James Harden, I think he'll be great. Same thing with Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen, he's coming off that 40-point and 18 rebound game. He's a crazy lob threat, always on the glass, things like that. He's going to create a lot more offensive chances for James Harden and Donovan Mitchell. So I think that team will be nice. I think they'll pair very well. You got that pick and roll with Jarrett Allen and James Harden will be great. Like I said, lob threat. The pick and pop or the pick and roll with Evan Mobley as well. Donovan Mitchell playing off ball or James Harden playing off ball, whatever the case might be. I think their pairing will be smooth as butter. Because like I said, last year with the Cavs, they played amazing. the first half of the season. You know, pretty much the most of the regular season, but that first half was crazy elite. I think it'll be the same thing with James Harden. Like I said, it's kind of, I'm not gonna say Darius Garland and James Harden are the same player, but James Harden is clearly an upgrade. He's a better playmaker, he's a better scorer. So I think you factor that in with Harden's veteran leadership, you know, the history he has. I think he's only going to make them better, and they're only going to, you know, operate smoothly, especially with them wanting to play with each other. I think the boys will be fine. I believe they said James Harden's going to make his debut on Saturday, so it'll be fun to see. Especially, you know, no practice or anything like that. It's definitely going to be fun to see, and I'm excited to see it. Like I said, it's another team in the East, making the East more competitive. Harden coming over here, pairing up with pairing up with Donnie. I think the East is getting very, very interesting. It's heating up. It's not the same old East that people say is soft, and, you know, they're not just soft, but that people say is not as talented as the West. I think this East, this new East, is going to be a fucking problem, and I think it's going to be fun to see. Even the teams at the bottom, you know, that made all these trades. I think it's gonna be very fun to see. It's not just gonna be, oh, the West is dominating, the West has the better players, the West has the better teams. No, I think even the teams at the bottom of the East are gonna be very interesting to watch, and I can't wait. I can't wait. Not even just for the rest of this year, but next year when everybody's healthy. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be insane. You got the Boston Celtics, Hallie on the Pacers with Zubac now. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun year for basketball. Like I said, though, this is probably one of the weirdest trade deadlines because it wasn't necessarily like, because the biggest headline was what? Giannis. And, you know, turns out Giannis didn't even get moved. Giannis is probably it's not probably, he's going to get moved in the summer. Ja Morant didn't get moved. A lot of guys nobody kind of expected to get moved got moved. Jaren Jackson, AD. Well, people kind of figured AD was going to get moved, but not to the Wizards. And he got harder than Darius Garland. That report came out maybe like a couple days ago, a week ago, and then it happened. So it was a weird trade deadline. It wasn't like kind of things we expected. It was kind of like everything opposite. So it was a fun, interesting trade deadline. I'll make another video on the other teams and, you know, smaller players and smaller market teams that made trades as well. But it's gonna be a good video as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is coming to the end of it. Like I said, though, this trade deadline was amazing. I hope you guys, you know, enjoyed this video. It was very fun for me to record. Like I said, episode 5 will be another breakdown of like the other trades that happen. You know, smaller market teams and teams that or players that may have got traded and waived, and what it's going to mean for those teams and those players. So look out for that. But yes, I do appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of the Outside Eye podcast. It's been fun to record this. I'll see you guys on the next one.
Can't believe she ain't know I was one of them ones that said you ain't know that. But it's cool cause I told her I ran out of love. I really don't care that I'm popping. I feel better when I'm going shopping. And to all of the homies, they